Welcome to Biz Help for You with host Candy Messer. Entrepreneurs like to focus on the big picture, like profitability, success, and a smooth-running organization. But there always seems to be those little things like taxes, employee compensation, laws, regulations, and more. Now you can get the answers you need in one place. Join us today as we break it all down for you. Now, here's your host, Candy Messer.
Hello and welcome to Biz Help for You with Candy Messer. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found the information on last week's show, Business Owners Deserve to be Financially Empowered, informative. If you are unable to join us and would like to listen to the show, links can be found on our YouTube and Facebook pages, as well as multiple favorite podcast platforms. If you'd like to receive notifications on when our podcasts have been uploaded, please like and subscribe. And if there are topics you'd find beneficial or questions you have, please feel free to reach out to me at media@abandp.com. Now let's learn a little bit about our guest today. Consuela Munoz is a speaker and leadership strengths coach, author of Her Story, The Day She Stopped. Leaders hire her to master the power of leadership because most dismiss their natural leadership style, lack confidence, and lose their top performers. So she helps them discover their leadership strengths, build their confidence, and attract the best. Bottom line, you'll be a confident leader everyone would love to work with. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Candy. It's great to be here today.
Well, I'm glad to have you here too. I'm actually looking really forward to this topic too. I'm familiar with Strengths Finders and a lot of the information that you're going to share, but it's been a long time since I've actually, discussed it and looked at it. So I know it's going to be a fun topic. But before we get into that, I would love for you to tell us just a little bit more about yourself and why did you even become an expert in the strengths-based leadership?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm kind of a strengths nerd. I'm going to just put that right out there, right at the start. So if it's about strengths, I've been playing with this for a long time. But how did I get started with strengths? One day I was just walking into work when I just kind of came to a stop. I came to a stop because I just had this epiphany. I don't know if you've ever been doing that. You're walking along and I had this epiphany that my entire life, I was just average. I was smart, but not a genius. I'm pretty, but not gorgeous, kind of average height. Okay, maybe a little less, but everything about my life was just average. Have you ever just felt that way? Like, oh.
Well, I think a lot of us feel we don't always measure up, when we're comparing to ourselves, no matter, even if it's someone that's super beautiful and gorgeous and stuff, I think sometimes they still see the negatives. So I think it's probably kind of how we all feel. We don't always necessarily just really stop and think about it, but probably deep down inside, that's what we do for ourselves.
Exactly. And for me, it was kind of this, earth shattering moment, if you will. To me, it was like, how does everybody keep moving past and just carrying on when I just had this huge thought? Like, can't they see I'm different? And I knew that I had to change and that I had something more to give and that I wanted to know that the work I did mattered. I wanted to have impact on my team, on my organization, on my family, and even beyond. And so how was I going to do that? And that's where Strength Finders really came in for me. I've taken the Strength Finder assessment and I had seen what, this glimpse of this greatness that I had within me and knew that more people needed this. And so I really started on this path of how can I, know more about strengths and how can I bring that to other people so that they too can do the work that they know matters and have that impact.
Right. Well, it's so important and it's helpful. I mean, there's all kinds of tests out there too that people can do to find out the personality traits and other things too. But I hadn't ever really heard of the strengths, looking at your particular strengths until I had a business coach many years ago. It was probably 8 or 10 years ago. And I was in a mastermind group and she told us all to go buy that book and take the assessment. And then we talked about it once in our mastermind. So it was very interesting. But for those who are totally unfamiliar with this topic, what would you define strengths-based leadership to mean?
Yeah. So, and of course I'm biased, right? Let's just put that out there. I'm biased, but truly I'm someone that's like, oh, I'll take that personality assessment, right?
Mhm.
And the difference for me when I took this one is that it really goes deeper than a lot of the other ones. In as far as, you can, what are your four directions? What are your, which, am I red or am I blue or whatever? But this one had more meaning because it goes deeper into like, I lead from influencing, but why? And strength-based leadership is really looking at that overall thing. So if you, your strengths, but what category, what leadership domain category does it fall into? And the thing about strength-based leadership is that you are looking at what is the strength of each person on your team, and how can you have everybody do what they do best and really boost the productivity and effectiveness of your team. And when you are a leader and you're moving in that route versus sticking to, working on someone's weaknesses or their opportunities for improvement, that's when you really mastered that strength-based leadership.
And you mentioned the assessment. So why don't you explain also to the listeners, what is the Clifton Strengths Finders assessment?
Yeah, so the Clifton Strength Finder assessment is similar if you've heard of Strength Finder 2.0 or just Strength Finders. So you take this assessment. What I love about it is that it's online and it's super fast paced. So you basically can't cheat. If you try, you're going to like destroy your brain trying to outthink it, because you have 20 seconds to answer each question. And you'll find after the first 5 or 10, if you try to outthink it, you'll miss questions and you'll just start to go crazy. So I love that about it. But what you get is, depending on which one, you get your top 5 strengths or you get all 34 strengths. So there are 34 strength themes, and those 34 are broken up into the 4 leadership domains. So they are executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. And the great thing about the strengths is then, so I'm from influencing, and you could be, we didn't talk about this, so I don't know where you lead from, and you could be, but we're going to do it in a different way. And the other thing that's really nice about that is that it doesn't matter what strengths you have or which leadership domain that you drive from, no matter what, you're a leader. Whether you lead an entire organization, your team, or even just yourself, you're a leader and you can do amazing things. And the point of that being, as long as you use your strengths with purpose.
Right. Well, I think what was helpful too, is it gives you like the pros and cons too, of, from what I remember too, again, it's been a while since I had looked at the book, but it would say like, here's what your strength is, and here are the good things about it, but here are some of the negatives that could be perceived by others, because of the way that you have your strengths or things like that too. Actually, I couldn't remember the 5th one because I was thinking this morning, like, what were they? I remember achiever was number 1. And then I had loyalty and harmony and connector, but I can't remember what that 5th one is. So, I'm like that person that always needs to feel like I'm accomplishing something, but at the same time, I like things to be like smooth and not having a lot of conflict and things like that.
It feels like you probably drive from relationship building, but with that achiever thrown in. So you're really making sure you get things done. So that's awesome. Based on what, in what way I'm relating to you today, that makes sense, right? You're connecting all of us and you're helping get the word out there, but you're making sure that things get done. So, yeah. And I always make the joke that if you worked with a coach, someone like me, you would remember your top 5. I have countless people, I'll come, oh, I did Strength Finder. I'll be like, oh, cool. What's your top 5 strengths? And they have no idea. And the thing about an assessment is, and you can take any kind of assessment and be like, oh, that's exciting about the results. But if you then put it on the shelf, that's where it's a little less useful. Right. And so when I talk about my process and my program, which is the CEO way, identifying your strengths is just the first step. Right. We have to do something with it.
Exactly. So now that someone has taken this test and they know what their strengths are, and if they're looking at it and they're thinking, well, I don't have, these certain strengths that they interpret are better, right, to have a leader. And you've already said all of these, you could be a leader, but what would you say to them if they're thinking, well, certain strengths are better than others?
So it's a natural feeling to have that, first off. So when folks, do get the all 34, right? They have from top to bottom, like the first thing they're going to do is like, what's my number one strength, right? The second thing they're going to do is look to see what's in the bottom. They just are. We're going to like, what are my top 5? And they're like, oh, what's at number 34? Oh, but I really wish I had that. I mean, it's a natural response to kind of be like bummed that you don't have a certain thing that you thought you did. And so, but it truly is that whatever strength you have, if you work from that strength, what you don't have won't matter. Now, when you talked about there's pros and there's cons, part of that is control. So any strength that you have, if you don't control it, can become a weakness, right? And so control and using them with purpose is a big part of what I'm working with people for them to understand. The other thing with the cons is how people can perceive that could be that you're missing that control. But the other, when you feel like you're missing something, we have an exercise we do that says, okay, if I think like I need to do this, or I'm missing this strength, these are my strengths. How can I use the strengths I have to do what I would need to do with the strength I feel is missing? If that makes sense. So you're going to figure out, how do you use your strengths to do the things you need to do? I had worked with a group where it was really obvious at the company that they really appreciated those that were in the executing group more than the other groups. And so anyone that didn't lead from executing kind of felt like, oh, I'll never make it here. And so we worked with that a lot. And the end of the day, what matters more is knowing what your strengths are and using and applying them, engaging your strengths with that purpose and control is what makes the difference.
Right. Well, and I think once you know too, as a leader with a staff, if you kind of know what some of their strengths are, you can put them into the right positions so that they can use their strengths to the best of their ability, which also helps your company. So if you have somebody who is, really not wanting to have conflict, maybe they're not the right person to be in your collections department or something like that, right? So figuring out, how can you use what they have to the best of their ability in the positions that they need to be in?
Oh my gosh, so completely this. And so, there's those thoughts around, I want to give this, I want them to stretch and I need them to step outside their comfort zone. And so, some leaders can be misguided in that and be like, okay, so you really suck at this. I'm going to have you do more of it. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, that is a lose-lose situation for everybody, because they're not going to be productive. They're not going to get you results, and your whole team is going to suffer. But instead, if you're worrying about, okay, this person's good at this and this person's good at this, how do I make sure that they get to do more of that and learn to step them out of their comfort zone in their strength? Right. That's when you can really like have your team be like highly effective and really produce some amazing results. If people can get really stuck on this, opportunities for improvement and stuff. And one thing I would say with that is we only have, I don't know how much free time you have, right? Maybe you've got hours and hours each day and week, but most people don't, right? I mean, we just don't. And so if we're going to look at that amount of time that we have to develop ourselves, we tend not to make that a priority. But even if you have 1 hour a week, if you spend that on something that you really aren't good at, the chances of you getting better are small. And the chances of you being great at that almost don't exist. But if you take that hour of development into something that you're really good at, you can become great at it. Right. And the better you are able to do that, who's going to have you do something you're not when you can be doing this thing? So one of the things I do, with teams when I work with them is we create a team map. And it's a visual, like, I'm a hands-on, we got a board and I write I have everybody write their own strengths on their top 5 strengths. And you can really easily see then where there's white spots for one, like, ooh, we got nothing going on over here. And where we've maybe have a lot, but you can see that. And then it helps you to start thinking about, we often do this at the start of goals planning or, project planning. And so we've got these 5 projects coming up, and we really need, what do we need? Well, we need someone that's good at negotiating, or we need someone that's good at getting the word out about this. Well, who do we have that's good with that? And so you can start planning your projects and your things based on where everybody does their best thing versus, well, Bob's been here for 10 years, so we're going to let Bob do this. Well, meanwhile, Bob is like all data. He's like, what? I got to talk to people? What? Like, I mean, so you can see how fast it can get out of control if we're doing that. One other thing I would say about this is when you work with the team and you're doing this, some things that can be problematic or create dysfunction in a team can be cleared up when you do this team map work. So let's say that you have somebody who's really strategic thinking, and they're working with someone who's executing, like, we're going to do this. And strategic thinking, this person's over there like, we should do this and we should do this, right? They could drive each other insane, literally, like to the point where they don't get along, right? So he never finishes anything. He's always like off on this tangent and that tangent. But if they have this and can see that about each other, and can make the switch to say, you know what, I'm really good at this piece and they're really good at this piece, and understand that and know, okay, that means I need to do these things while they're doing those things. And then that resentment about them not finishing and them always having to finish can go away.
Right.
And that understanding of like, well, this is what they do best, so we're going to let them focus here. I do this best. If we partner, we're a power team. And so people start to see their strengths and the strengths of everybody else on their team in a completely different way that makes some of that dysfunction just disappear.
Right. Well, and earlier you talked about the different domains too. And so is there one, in your opinion, too, that is a stronger domain, or again, it's just kind of people fall into the 4, they're all equally, as important, and not to worry if you don't go into one that you think you should be in?
Yeah, so I feel that they are equally as important. Like any strength, any domain you lead from, you can lead well. Now, as far as where people fall, like this test is global and something like 30 million people have taken the assessment. So are there some strengths that pop up more often than others? Yes. More people fall into executing and strategic thinking, and then relationship building, and then influencing. But it doesn't mean that if you're in influencing, you can't get things done. And it doesn't mean if you're in strategic thinking that you can't deal with people. It's just, how do you use your strengths to do what needs to be done and to complete it?
So what would you tell someone then too, who sees other people in what they consider are leadership roles, and they're thinking, well, I don't think I can do that. You've already said that you could be a leader from any of these, but someone might think, well, I'm like the quiet behind the scenes person. Like, how do I actually lead somebody? Can you help them understand that?
Sure, definitely. I mean, we have a whole thing, especially if, this whole extroverted, introverted, it does not matter. What matters is knowing what your strengths are and using them with purpose, right? So I talk about that my CEO way. It's celebrate, and then it's engage. You have to be using your strengths, and then at the end, it's owning your confidence. When you really know what your strengths are, it won't matter. Now, if you see someone and the way they're leading, you're really impressed with it. It could be that they're an opposite from you, and that's why you're fretting. But it doesn't mean that you can't achieve that. And so we can work with whatever strengths you have to figure out the best way for you to be engaged and really to have the impact in this lifetime that you really want.
Yeah, I think it's important for everyone to realize too that, again, like we said earlier, we might be looking at ourselves and comparing ourselves and judging, but we all have, our strengths, and we all have things that we can improve on. But then by working together, we can support each other, right? And that's how we can really make an impact. And that's what a leader is leading other people and making an impact, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So when we talk about, sorry, just real quick, a story, this how we view ourselves. And this is the thing I seen when I took the assessment. how you view yourself and what you're capable of can change like that when you take the assessment. I mean, that's a great thing. Just taking the assessment can boost your self-confidence by like 30%. And here's an example. So a girlfriend of mine, I said, hey, I want to do something with this. Will you let me practice on you? Of course, you know how we are, right? She's like, okay, I guess so, right? So, but I had her take the assessment and we get back the results and I'm looking at it and she is like a powerhouse in executing. She's got discipline and focus and I'm sitting over here with none of that going, dang, that's cool. She's got all this stuff, but here's the thing. She's like, oh, that's why I'm so anal. So she had heard constantly griping from her partner about how anal she was, to the point where she felt really self-conscious about it and fretted about asking people to do things because they would see her as anal, because she saw herself as anal, because that is that negative connotation that's associated with strengths, right? But now we sit down and we look at this and I'm like, are you kidding me? This, like, I don't have any of this. This is amazing. Like, this is your superpower, you know, and I don't like to use that term all the time because it gets a little overused, but this is the thing that you're most amazing at. And it's amazing what she did for us. Her role in our team, she was in charge of document control in an environmental and safety department. So we don't get fines with the EPA and ISO, right? Like, very important that she knows how to dot all those I's and cross the T's, right? And so the difference though, so we would have a procedure that would have to be updated every 2 years or whatever it was, and every 3 years. And so she, at the year mark, would be like, hey, you know, before we took the strength finder, she'd be like, I see that your thing is coming due. Do you think you could be working on it? Because it's going to be due in a year. And she would kind of let it lie until it got to really a pain point. After we took the assessment, she's like, no, this is just what we need. And this is why I'm in this role. And so she'd be like, hey, it's a year out. You need to form your committee so you can start getting this procedure done. I'm going to check back with you in a month to see where you are. So she was just like really super organized and on top of it in a way that helped all of us to do our jobs better. But it was because the way she saw herself as an amazing person able to do all this versus, oh, I'm so anal. And so that is one of the things that really understanding your strength results can do for you in a quick moment.
Well, as a similar thing, you know, I had, when we were in this group where we had to take this test, one of the girls, hers, I think one of her top ones was activator or something, right? Where it said, you make a decision and you just implement, you know, and she was saying that, you know, she'd actually had a situation once where, you know, she talked to someone and she's like, okay, well now, you know, do this and then move on and do this, you know, and the person kind of got offended. Right. And so she was like, well, what did I do? Well, then coming back and looking at this, we're like, well, this is why, but then turning it into a positive, she's able to help business owners who've said they're going to make a decision, like actually start implementing those things, right? So she's able to help them achieve the goals that they set out for themselves, but they sometimes procrastinate on it. And so I think it was her being able to look at, like, yes, someone interpreted the way that I do things from the negative perspective, and that's not what I intended, but now I know how to actually use this to help other people better than I did before, because now I really understand it, kind of what the purpose is. So I think it does just shine a light on, you know, we kind of know innately some of our strengths, but once you get that test and you can see, like, yes, this is really where you come out and how those are helpful for other people too, I think it gives you confidence.
Indeed, indeed. And I always say, you know, we kind of have an idea, and the longer you work, the more experience you have, the more, you know, a better idea you might have of what you think you're strong at. But it's completely different when you see in black and white words on a page, and those words are from somebody else saying, hey, this is what you do best. Right. It has a whole different feeling for us than we were kind of maybe thinking this. Right. It's more real when it's on paper in black and white, like, yeah, I'm amazing. And when people are struggling with things like writing their bio or trying to say, like, I'm able to do this in, you know, writing up their annual, you know, work reviews, right? Their performance review, like, oh, I don't even know what to say. I'm always like, pull out your strength report, look at the phrases in there, and what project, how did any one of those sentences in there help you see how you did that in a project. And then it's like flipping a switch and people are able to like write out, oh yeah, I do this because I do this, versus that blank page. Like, I don't know, but seeing those words can make all the difference for sure.
Right. So now if someone, has this assessment and they can use this information, right, to help them really understand how to use their strengths, like I said, in work or other things, but they're still not quite confident, how do you actually help them take that information and raise their confidence?
All right. So here's what we do. So for me, it's the CEO way.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to celebrate your gifts. We're going to engage your strengths, and we're going to own your confidence. Because again, just reading the assessment doesn't mean that you are using those strengths and applying them. And it doesn't mean you have all that confidence, right? It takes a minute. I mean, I make sure that people take the assessment 2 weeks before they talk to me. So you can have time to settle in and start recognizing this strength and that strength happening. But so for me, what I have them do, we work through this process. Now I say celebrating because of that thing that we said earlier in the beginning. Sometimes when people take this, they can get really down about what's at the bottom of their list. And I say, bah, to that, because we only got so much time. So let's just celebrate what we have and make that work for us, because ain't nobody got time for what's at the bottom. We're not even going to worry about it. And it doesn't mean that what's at the bottom is your weakness. It's just not where you drive from. So where do you drive from and how can you capitalize it? But then we're going to move into this program where we're going to really start figuring out, how do I use my strengths in work I already do? So we're going to look at, how have you used your strengths? How have you seen them in the past? And what way are you using that really energizes you? I think it's a big deal to understand that this is a strength theme. And so how do you use this strength in your day-to-day? So it doesn't, one of the things, some of the other assessments will be like, oh, if you have this result, you should go be a camp counselor, or you have this result, you should be a lawyer.
Right.
What? So any strength can help you do anything. So we're not going to say like, oh, well, you have this, so you should probably do this work.
Right.
It's more like, what are you passionate about? What gives you energy? What do you enjoy doing? What puts you into the flow? So I love creating e-learnings. Like I could be like, I'll be right there in like 5 minutes. And it'll be an hour and a half. And they're like, you said 5 minutes. Oh, I mean, because I can get lost in it. You have to figure out what are those things and how are your strengths working in that, because they go together. And so we're going to sort through those things and come up with your strength statements. We're also going to deal with those pesky weaknesses, right? We're not going to fix them, because you don't fix your weaknesses, but we're going to figure out, how do you stop them? How do you stop them, mitigate them from having any power? And so we're going to create that weakness statement. And this is all in that engage your strengths mode. And so we're going to start doing those till they become really part of you. But then the next step is, once we have those statements, we need to grow those strengths, right? I talked about, if you only have a little time to develop, let's develop the things you're already good at and that are natural for you. It makes sense, right? Like if I'm naturally good at art, I'm not going to go to college and get, a science degree.
Right.
I mean, you might, but that wasn't
probably
good.
Not.
That wasn't good. That wasn't the best path for you. Like somebody sold you a magic bean, like don't do that. Right. So it's how do we figure out those and how do we use those? And then, so that it takes time. I'm not going to lie. There's some work involved. You can't just be like, oh, I mean, that's like saying, is there a pill that can just make me lose 50 pounds? It doesn't work like that. You got to do some work, right? And it'll take some time, but you will start to see and grow your strengths to the point where you know them. And when I say own them, you know, this is what your strength is, and that's how you best do things. And so when someone says, well, maybe you should do it this way, as a small business owner, people are coming at you left and right, like, oh, have you tried this? Have you tried this? And it can be overwhelming, right? So instead, if you own your strength, you say, no, that's not going to work for me. I do things this way. And when you're at that point where you're comfortable in saying, no, that's not going to work, I'm going to do it this way, that's when you really start to own them. And that's when the confidence comes there. And I say own your confidence. And to me, it's different than some of that confidence. It's strength-based confidence, because you truly know what you're able to do. And it's always taking that step back and saying, these are my strengths. This is how I'm going to do something. Right. A lot of times, if we're going to start a new task, or we're going to, start a new role. There's kind of an assumed way, like a default way to do that work. Or someone will be like, this is how I did it with their,
or how the
15,
company's always done it, right?
Right. Here's your 15-point list you have to check off. And me, I'd be like, geez, I'm going to get through 2 and quit, so, but it's okay. And when you are at the point where you're like, no, wait, let me just take a step back. These are my strengths. What are the results you need? This is how I'm going to do it. And when you can confidently tell them no and say, I'm going to do it this way, that's when you can have that strength-based confidence.
Right. So when you were talking about the CEO way too, you're talking about, that person is going to celebrate their strengths and own, everything too. But what about if someone is working with the team? Can they implement that with their team across like the team, or is it still just more individual? Like, how would that work?
Yeah. So it sounds like it wouldn't, but it does. It completely works. So you want each of you to do that. If you're a leader and you have a team, what I say is you need to be a leader of leaders. You need to be developing each person on that team to be a leader. If you want the people on your team to care about the goals and the results as much as you do, you have to treat them as a leader and develop them as a leader, really care about what are their strengths and what can they do, and have them doing more of that. And so each person, that's one of my favorite things, right, is to work with the leader and everyone on their team, and to really have everybody having those aha moments and really getting it. Like, oh, but this is what I do best, but that's what it does best. And when I'm working through things that I don't want to do anymore to stop my weaknesses, yeah, but Susie's really great at it. So Susie will take that over and I'll do this for her. Like, hey, we've got our role switch. Let's do this.
Right.
And having those conversations is now easy because everybody knows strengths, everybody's on board with this. And there's none of that resentment of like, you just don't want to do something because,
right,
you're lazy or whatever, because it's like, no, but that's not where they're strongest. And I am, so I should do it. And people start thinking about things in that way. And that's when a team just becomes super high performance.
Right. Well, I was just thinking too, as you were talking about that too, maybe sometime, even if someone understands, like, when that's not my strength, if they were used to doing a certain thing and that was part of their job, and now you're going to take that from them because that's not their strength, and you're going to reassign, like, how do you, as a leader, help them understand this is not a punishment, right? Or it's not that you're not doing this well. I just want to put you somewhere that you're going to flourish, right? But then not have them feel like they're losing maybe their identity even as what they did in that position.
Right. So one of the ways that we're going to approach this, one of the things that also is part of the program is, how do we have strengths conversations? How do we have weakness conversations that feel comfortable? So you can't walk into it. Let's say you were doing it on your own. You can't walk into your boss and say, you know what, I'm not good at this. I don't want to do it anymore. That's not going to work, right? Like, no, I'm done with this. Like, that's not going to work, right? So how do you have that conversation instead? And so when we're working with the team, we really work through how do we have those conversations and get everybody on board. And if someone was kind of had their identity tied to this, figure out why. Why was that important? What are they losing by sticking to that? And what could they be gaining by being in charge of something else that's more aligned with what they're naturally good at? And so you have to have those conversations. Again, it does take work. You have to do those conversations and in a thoughtful, caring way about where each person is from. Thinking about the strengths is how we do things, but it also helps us figure out how to converse with each other based on how their strengths are. Right. And so that's part of the work that we would do as a team, is to figure out how do we have those conversations and make sure everybody is on board with any changes that you're going to make.
So if someone's listening now and they're saying like, oh, I really want to take that assessment, I want to find out, my strengths and, maybe not so much my weaknesses, but they're really interested, how can they find that assessment?
So one of the things that I would like to put out there is I have this confidence recipe, and it really talks about more of the things around that CEO way and how that you can do that. And so if you just go to www.confidencerecipe.com, you can register and download that recipe. with that, there are some links that you can connect to me, my email, and going into my website, you can purchase the Strength Finder assessment at a discount. And so
Nice.
go out to ownyourconfidence.com and you can purchase the assessment, and then we'll have a conversation after where we figure out how you can learn to celebrate your strengths.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Consuela, for being a guest and talking about this topic today. I know it's an interesting topic and one that probably isn't really covered enough. So I appreciate your taking the time to chat.
Yeah, it was awesome. Again, I told y'all at the beginning, I am total strengths nerd. So anytime when, they ask you the question, what is that topic you can talk about for 30 minutes or an hour with no prep? This is it for me.
Right. There you go. It's a good one. And I do hope that the listeners too, those who are tuning in, I hope you found this topic interesting and that it answered some of your questions about being a confident, strengths-based leader. Again, if you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to Consuela. Go ahead and find the links for that assessment, as well as any other resources she has, that recipe that she has there. And if you have other questions for us as well, you can send us a message at media@abandp.com. And would you please share our show information with those you know? I'd greatly appreciate your support. I hope you can join us for our next week's topic, 3 easy steps from clutter to cash flow. And please remember, you can connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And my website is abandp.com. Remember, you can also find the podcast posted on multiple favorite podcast platforms, including Google, TuneIn, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Until next time, have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next Tuesday. Have a terrific week.